What up, team? Today we're going over the Ascendencies that were announced in the Dawn of the Hunt reveal. These are from the press kit on the official announcement page, so this is like a legitimate source. I didn't really look at them yesterday, like in depth and really think about it, and now that I've had a day to kind of go over it, I figured I would kind of share my thoughts with you guys. First up is our dearest Fecalsmith. Yesterday I kind of just laughed at this guy and pretty much wrote everything off. And this was mainly because I just saw the fucking anvil thing and the floating hammer, and I was just like, dude, shut this shit off. But the more I actually look at this Ascendancy, I think it'll be one of the best Ascendancies in the game by far. First and foremost, we have Coal Stoker and Forged in Flame. These are straight up pulled from the Chieftain in PoE 1, and this is kind of the beginning of why I think this character will be so strong, is because this is the first character in Path of Exile 2 that actually has legitimate defensive layers that we see in PoE 1 where you can just kind of be unkillable. And most certainly, the freebie Melding of Flesh, which is what Forged in Flame is one of those layers. This essentially means that this character will hit 90 all res quite easily, especially when you combine it with Smith's Masterwork and you take Flowing Metal. That's just another free +5. And then if you go into the passive tree and you take Prism Guard, going from the left to get the other max fire res nodes, this is another +3 to all res. This means that for the cost of 3 passive points and of course, your Ascendancy, you only need to get 7 more max fire res in order to be 90 all res cap. 90 all res is a massive defensive layer. That is a huge deal, especially because, and I'm going to say something that probably is going to piss a lot of people off, I don't know what everyone is talking about, okay? Like, it's literally me, okay? I'm alone on an island. I don't know anyone else who shares the same sentiment. I played a Titan and a Warbringer through all the endgame content, except for Simulacrum because it's fucking impossible. And not once did I ever have an issue with fizz damage. I felt fizz damage was fine. I felt that armor worked fine. I had no complaints about armor. In my mind, the big thing to solve was LE damage. And Karn actually said something similar. I think Karn is in the same boat where he didn't think that fizz damage was the problem. It was all about LE damage that you were taking because you take so fucking much in a map because there's so much proj and so many spells going out. Solving LE damage was the big crux of making the warrior tanky, and 90 Alres is more or less a silver bullet solution to that problem. Moving on to Smith's Masterwork, assuming that you can allocate up to 4 points or up to as many points as you have available, because that's really the only logical way this would even work. I think that this is actually an incredibly strong node because, again, we go back to the PoE 1 defensive layers, notably in Dedication to Katava, where body armor grants armor also applies to chaos damage taken from hits. This is also ripped from PoE 1 off the Armor of Fourth Vow. I think this is a very strong node for dealing with chaos damage, and all that in combination leads me to why I think this will be one of the strongest Ascendancies in the game, because it is the only Ascendancy that I can think of that actually has an answer to all of the damage types in the game. You have 90 all res for LE damage, you have armor to chaos plus chaos res for chaos damage, you also have Leech to deal with all of the overtime effects. Leech is an unbelievably strong layer. It's very good. I learned that in my time as a warrior. And then of course you have armor to deal with fizz damage. And again, maybe I'm psychotic and you should just not listen to anything I say, but I thought armor was fine. I never thought fizz was an issue. Karn never thought fizz was an issue. I'm sure he probably thinks differently about armor because everyone else does. But yeah, in my opinion, this is the only character in the game that actually has a well-rounded defensive kit that has an answer to every type of damage. Probably the biggest consideration of this character is going to be what are the unique body armor options and what body armor mods and sort of things are going to come into play in the new patch to determine what is our opportunity cost of Smith's Masterwork. One of the initial reasons I wasn't so big on it was because not only do you lose a body armor slot, mind you still do, it looks like you retain sockets as well as maybe corruptions too, but on top of losing your body armor slot, you also lose half of an Ascendancy. That's half an Ascendancy plus unique body armor to, go Smith's Masterwork. That's a pretty substantial opportunity cost. So if it is the case that there are really good unique armors, it's possible that Smith's Masterwork would just be outclassed. Looking at everything else, it's a little bit too difficult to look at like Living Weapon and Against the Anvil. I don't even know what these mean. I don't know what these skills are. These may or may not be legitimate options. I kind of just laugh these off and write them away because I just cannot even comprehend the idea of forging my fucking hammer in the middle of a fight or like summoning a weapon. Neither of those things sound appealing. And then Heat of the Forge, fire spell on hit. This sounds, one of my comments mentioned it as like a fire Mjolnir, which sounds like it could be cool. The only issue I have is I don't know what you would really fit with this, right? You would have to take probably Against the Anvil or Living Weapon, because I think that Coal Stoker and Forged in Flame are a required 4 points. Those are so insane for a warrior. There's just no shot you can't take those. So you're really only working with 4 Ascendancy points in my opinion. Maybe Heat of the Forge plus Living Weapon weapon or something like, or not, against the anvil, fuck living weapon. But yeah, Heat of the Forge against the anvil, Forge and Flame Coal Stoker, all of that might be cracked. We'll just have to see. Next up is my long lost true love, the Javazon, or Amazon if you're a fucking loser. This Ascendancy looks cracked. First up, I'm looking at Mystic Harvest. I actually thought about this like multiple times while I was playing my warrior and how I was realizing how good Leech was. I was worried that like, fuck, how am I going to get Leech on my Javazon? This is going to be rough. But of course, they solved that for us. Leech recovers based on your elemental damage as well as fizz damage. So whatever little fizz damage you have, it also was going to apply to Leech, despite the fact you're probably going to be dealing mostly Ellie. So this is going to be dope. Again, Leech is a crazy layer. I live and die on that hill. Moving on, we have Critical Strike. Chance hit with attacks can exceed 100%. 25% of excess chance to hit is gained as critical strike chance. That is actually pretty insane given how easy it is to accuracy stack in PoE 2. On top of that, we get Penetrate. Attacks using your weapons have added physical damage equal to 25% of the accuracy rating on the weapon. And I believe this is referring to the actual accuracy roll on the javelin or the whatever the weapon is itself. Because if it was like, 30,000 accuracy, 25% of that, or 32,000 for easier math, it's not going to be 8. There's no way, right? I'm assuming this means it's the roll on the weapon, which is still fine because you're going to want to take accuracy wherever you can, which leads me to why I think this is just going to be a crazy ascendancy, because accuracy stacking is already really good. You get a ton of attack speed from Falcon Dive. You can also stack Dex to get attack speed, and Dex helps build accuracy. So this is just going to synergize really well. It's very similar to how Mana Stacker worked, and I'm assuming it's going to be extremely strong. Next up, we have Predatory Instinct. Reveal weaknesses against rare and unique enemies, 50% more damage against enemies with an open weakness. I think that this node, I mean, this is just good, right? Like, there's absolutely zero complaints here. It seems to be just 50% more damage. We'll have to see kind of how open weakness and reveal weakness works. And then if you go in for the kill, you get 20% movement speed and 40% kill speed when you are in the presence of someone with an open weakness. Again, depending on how open weakness and reveal weakness works, these may or may not be really good, or they might just be whatever. I don't know if I'll take these. They don't really synergize with kind of what I'm thinking in my head, although maybe, take Mystic Harvest, Critical Strike, Penetrate, and then take 50% more damage with Predatory Instinct. I was kind of looking at Elemental Infusion. It just depends as well, like what the infusions are. Also, I know you can get Frenzy Charges. It depends on how hard or easy it is to get Frenzy Charges on this character, that sort of thing. So we'll see. A lot of the Elemental Infusion, Infused Avatar stuff is all completely up in the air given how strong Infused Weapon is, how strong infusions are. We just don't really know. We also have Stalking Panther. Evasion rating from equipped helmet, gloves, and boots is doubled. Body armor is halved. Maybe. I don't know. This seems just kind of not very worth. Even if it does equate to more total evasion, it's probably not going to be a significant amount depending on what your body armor is. Maybe it would be, but to lose 2 ascendancy points for that, especially when you have some crazy shit like, again, all of these other nodes, I don't really know if this is very good. And then Asmiri Brew, whatever, this might be cool. Fuck it, who knows? I am not really too interested in this. I could maybe see some crazy synergy here, but the reality is it's still 2 points. And again, we have a crazy passive tree on the left side, so probably not. I wouldn't take this. Next up is the Ritualist. This one is a really obvious one. There's really not a whole lot to talk about. The extra ring slot right here, plus the 25% increased bonus. You get an Ingenuity, you have 3 rings, 100% increased effect. That's 6 rings total on top of 1.25 amulets. That alone is going to be absolutely insane. I'm sure people are going to do crazy shit with that. In regards to a lot of the rest of these nodes, they don't seem that crazy. I mean, Intricate Sigils, 1 charm slot, 20% more charm charges. I fucking hate charms, so absolutely fuck this. Mindful Factories consume 25% maximum mana trigger charms with insufficient charges. Maybe this is super good. I don't know. I'm not a charm gamer, okay? I don't even fucking use my charms except for the non-freeze ones, so whatever. Maybe this is crazy. I have no idea. Wildwood Persistence, maybe a low life setup. This would be cool, something like that. This definitely screams low life. That'd be kind of sick. You'd get 50% increased life recovery. Maybe that's cracked. Corrupted Life Force, I don't know what this actually is or what Blood Boil is. Maybe this is a corrupting blood or something like that. And then of course, As the Whispers Demand and As the Whispers Ask, we saw these in the actual announcement. Again, the animation to stab the ground to get a headhunter buff for 30 seconds, so every 30 seconds you're stabbing the ground and shit. This is probably a hard pass for me, honestly. I don't really know. This seems way too cumbersome. It's just a problem of speed, right? This seems like it would get old quick as fuck. Just think about doing this for like 300 maps. By the 100th map, you'd literally be like, damn, I wish I was that dead body on the ground. Like, you fuck doing this forever. Like, there's no shot. Next up, we have the Lich. I personally think this is one of the most insane Ascendencies I've ever seen, particularly because of Eternal Life. The amount of doors that this opens up, assuming it works how I think it works. So here's an example. Up in Soulless form, we have 10% damage taken bypasses energy shield. If we combine this with Adziri's Disdain, where you can get like a 34% roll if you corrupt it, so 34% damage taken bypass energy shield, you have 44% in total, but your life cannot change what you have, yes. It's just that 44% is erased. It's straight up a 44% less damage taken modifier. And then on top of this, you get things like life tap. So if you convert your main cast with life tap instead of inspiration to cost life, it just doesn't cost anything. And it might be that if it cannot change, it means you can't do things like anything that costs life. So maybe life tap wouldn't work, or the support that sacrifices life to give you chaos damage on cast, maybe you can't actually sacrifice anything, so that would block it out. Either way, Eternal Life comes off as one of those nodes that is going to be hyper build enabling, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see a ton of builds based around this because it does seem so strong. Going back up the tree to Soulless form, we have 10% of damage taken bypasses ES, and then no inherent mana regen, and regenerate mana equal to 6% of your maximum life per second. This is a bit of a tricky node to deal with. Obviously ignore the damage bypass, but with no mana regen and it being based off 6% of your max life, this is a bit difficult because if you ran CI, you wouldn't have any mana regen, but if you don't go CI, then you have to deal with chaos damage. And I think how chaos damage works in PoE 2 is that chaos hits deal double damage to ES, but chaos dot, like poison, goes through ES. So you'd be immune to poison effectively, which is great. However, the problem is that hits are going to really reduce your ES pool quite heavily, so that might be an issue. And then a positive is that 6% of your max life per second is not a small modifier, especially if you're not mana stacking. This will equate to an ass ton of mana regen. Like if you have 3k life but only like 1100 mana, this is a lot because percentage mana regen modifiers don't really exist in PoE really at all. So to get a 6% modifier on a pool that is likely going to be 2 to 3 times larger, assuming we're not mana stacking, this does actually seem pretty good. So like I said, there's a lot of pros and cons here, and this honestly kind of screams to me like a new player trap almost, where like you might not totally understand what you're getting yourself into and kind of the implications of Soulless form and Eternal Life and how it limits you. So I could see this causing a lot of problems for people, but regardless, I do think these two nodes are going to be cracked the fuck out. Next up, we have Price of Power, and I will consider the small node before it, which is Energy Shield if consumed. So if you consume a power charge, you gain 30% Energy Shield, and then non-channeling spells consume power charges to deal 25% more damage. This seems all well and good. It really just depends on the investment required to consistently gain power charges, because the opportunity cost here is that not only are you taking 2 Ascendancy points, you also have to do whatever it else is you need to do to get more power charges. If that's only a couple passive points, then maybe it's probably worth it. But if it's like, you know, an item plus 4 passive points plus 2 ascendancies to get 25% more damage, it's possible that that opportunity cost could be better spent elsewhere to get more damage on your cast, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the consideration here. Looking at Crystalline Phylactery, this seems kind of cool, except my only gripe with it is it's 2 jewel slots is what this is. It's just here's 2 jewel slots, here you go. And maybe, again, this is really worth it, especially because you do get 20% max ES prior to it, but it also comes with that downside of 50% more mana cost if you have no ES, although I imagine this probably won't be that big of a deal. Really, I can summarize my issue with this as it's just 2 jewel slots for 2 ascendancy points, and this would be fine if your ascendancy nobles were trash, but honestly, Lich has some crazy looking shit on it. Maybe Price of Power is really good, Rupture the Soul, we'll get that in a second, and then maybe Dominion over Flesh, right? Maybe Eldritch Empowerment is also really good. There's just a lot that is worthwhile here, or seems worthwhile. Realistically, there's probably going to be a lot of minion players on this Ascendancy, so they're going to be taking Necromantic Conduit and Blackened Heart, I would assume. I don't actually know. But again, there's just a lot of really good things here, and to exchange those out for jewel sockets that you could just simply get on the passive tree, that's a fucking X for doubt, bud. Big X for doubt. The last thing that I will mention with Crystalline Phylactery is something I've wanted to talk about with builds for a while. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to really say it. I don't know totally how to even name it, but it's going to be like the scarcity of unique modifiers in the game. And what I'm getting at here is that I can get jewel sockets all the live long day in my passive tree. I have ample access to jewel sockets, and they can't even be non-unique here, so they have to be rare. So I can get access to rare modifiers on jewel sockets and jewel sockets all over the place, right? It's very abundant. However, things like Eternal Life or Rupture the Soul or Soulless Form, etc., these are only available on the Ascendancy tree themselves. Meaning that if it is the case that you take jewel sockets here, you will not be able to have access to something on this tree. And the difference is there is no access to these things anywhere else that we know about. They might be on uniques, of course. That's always a thing. But the general idea is that this is the only place we have access to these things, whereas in terms of modifiers on rare jewels and rare jewels just in general, we have access everywhere. It's kind of like winning a bunch of tickets at an arcade and they have like this super special item that's really not available anywhere else, but instead of using your tickets to buy that, you use them to buy candy bars because you want candy bars. And it's like, motherfucker, you had $10 in your pocket. We could just done a 7-Eleven down the road, and then you could have got that thing that you could only purchase with fucking tickets, right? Kind of what I'm getting at. Anyways, moving on. Next up is Eldritch Empowerment. This will just completely depend on how abundant access to energy shield regen is, or how easy it is to gain energy shield back. This might be through recharge, through some form of leech, through ES on kill, blah, blah, blah. However you want to do it. I think that's probably will be the hinge point here. Like, if you're getting a ton of ES back and the additional 3% cost is completely negligible, then yeah, for sure, this will probably be pretty good. It's just 30% more damage. But conversely, if ES recovery is kind of scarce or somewhat difficult to manage, then you'll probably skip over this. Next up, we have, of course, the fanfare that they gave us, which is Rupture of the Soul. This is Profane Bloom from PoE 1. Cursed enemies killed by you or allies in your presence have a 33% chance to explode, dealing a quarter of their maximum life as chaos damage. It's slightly nerfed. Profane Bloom was 50%, so now it's down to 33%. And this will entirely depend on what the audio design is. And I will let this work of art demonstrate what I'm talking about. The monkey is you, in case you were wondering. And yeah, Profane Bloom, when you're just listening to that all day, it's like music to your ears. And I swear to fucking God, if it does not sound as good in PoE 2, this entire Ascendancy is a pile of shit. Assuming they don't fuck up the audio design, I think Rupture of the Soul will be very good. It will be solid for clear. Clear is a big deal in PoE 2. I think it's way more important in PoE 2 than it is in PoE 1, honestly. I think it will also kind of depend on how hard it is to curse enemies. I don't know, it just depends on what build you're using and are you cursing or not. Speaking of which, that takes us to Dominion over Flesh. This will be entirely dependent. Are you running a curse build? If you're running a curse build and hexproof is kind of a big deal, this will be really good. So again, these two nodes, no issues with these. I think these are both dope. And lastly, we have Necromantic Conduit and Blackened Heart. I'm not even going to comment on these. I know nothing about minion builds and I intend to keep it that way. You can see our boy Gazzy, he knows all about them. I'll refrain from making any comments about being a minion enjoyer this one time. Last and most certainly least, we have the Tactician. I honestly don't even know where to begin. I hate everything on this screen right now. Unleash Hell was kind of the only cool thing that I saw, and honestly, they didn't do a good job selling it. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, okay, when we watch this, I don't think it kills anything on the screen, and everything dies after he uses an actual ability and not Unleash Hell. Also, like, what is the attack time here? It's like, these volleys, yo, the archers need some training, okay? They need to get these arrows out quicker. Holy fuck. Can you imagine being this idiot on the field? Yo, you guys gonna fucking shoot your bow or... And then it's like we have whoever pays best. You can place multiple banners. Uh-oh. Something's happening to me. By the way, thank God they brought those back. When my girlfriend comes in and wants to go to an indoor water park, I'm actually fucking paralyzed with indecision between the ideas of getting pissed drunk on a lazy river or dropping a fucking post with a bed sheet on it in the middle of Valve Factory so I can move faster in a tiny circle. Because one of those things for sure isn't a step towards the edge of a fucking bridge. But anyways, yeah, so that's how I feel about banners, and that's kind of how I feel about this entire Ascendancy in general. Like, a lot of this is just whatever. I don't play with groups, so this doesn't matter, that sort of thing. Maybe the buff thing is nice. Stay light, use cover. You defend with 2% armor, but your max fizz reduction is 50%. Like, does this override that? It must not. So, I mean, it's not that hard to get 50% fizz reduction. You don't need 200% armor. So, yeah, I don't know. A lot of this is just kind of a hard pass. 100% armor as extra stun and evasion as extra ailment. Like, who gives a fuck? I don't know. I'll let someone else, kind of how I deferred minions to Gazzy, I will absolutely let someone else go over Tactician. I am not the Tactician guy. I got nothing for you here. All right, you guys, that is all I have for you today. 0.2 is going to be a banger. I will see you guys there for the 24-hour stream, April 4th. Tell your friends. And yeah, deuces, boys. See you in the next one.